All right, folks, you are listening to episode number 46 of the Seleção podcast. I am, of course, your host, Danny Pinto, officially now the second most handsome person on this panel. Thanks a lot, Eric Krakauer, you devilishly handsome man who has that Florida tan, the Florida man. How are you, sir?
I do have a Florida tan. It reminds me of growing up in the Algarve, but I'm digging your hat, man. I've never seen one of those.
It's honestly, it's all it is where are we at? It's an Under Armour hat that I got custom made with red with a green pea, and I'm glad you're wearing a hat too. And this was completely unrehearsed in rehearsal, so I love it. I love it.
I love the commitment to Portugal and all things Portuguese soccer.
I mean, look at my arm. I haven't shown this to anybody yet, but there it is.
There you go. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, it's if you guys are listening to us or watching us only on YouTube, make sure you subscribe over on the podcast side. If you're only a podcaster, hit the subscribe button on YouTube. We would really appreciate the support, especially having a guy like Eric making some time for us. So again, Eric, we are very much indebted to your time here, and a lot to talk about. As first things first, how does a man impact a $4 billion change in the market when he says no to Coke and just says agua?
Well, I'm not sure there's it's corollary. I don't know if it's causality in that situation. A lot has been made about it, but if it is a direct result of him doing that, man, does it really show the power of celebrity? And only a few of those have that sort of magnetism, have that sort of, power, to use the word once again. But incredible that happens the very next day.
Yeah, we'll see how Heineken does after Pogba's press conference a day later. So, but we shall see. But yeah, Eric, a lot to talk about here as Portugal. If you were to just go ahead and on the surface go with a 3-0 victory to open up group play in Hungary against Hungary, 3 goals, 3 or +3 on the goal differential. On the surface, everything is hunky-dory, and it's a great start for the champs. Obviously, we know that's not what it is in reality, but let me get just a quick thought from you on everything that happened in group or in match day 1 for Portugal against Hungary.
Well, I think it's what we expected, right? And I'm pretty sure that you and I talked about this in our preview pod, that this was going to be a difficult game, not only because Hungary are a very good, defensively solid team. They're built on their defensive solidity because they don't have much at the top. Although I thought that Jalai was excellent, the big center forward with the long hair who got into it with Ruben Dias at one point during that game. But without Szoboszlai, it was always going to be a tough ask in transition for that team. However, they did put the ball in the back of the net, and fortunately for Portuguese hearts, Schöne was offside when he got that pass, but he still had a lot to do, and Rui Patricio was poorly beaten at the near post. I hate to use a cliche, but that is a fact. We know that we're slow starters in tournaments. I think it was the first win in the first game since 2008, if I'm not mistaken. I forget who that was against.
I'll look that up.
We should really have that information at our fingertips, but
we can't know it all, Eric. We can't know it all. We're just humble Portuguese guys who are trying to do their best on a podcast. That's all we're doing, brother.
That's absolutely true. But I have to say that nothing that I saw in that game surprised me in the least. A difficult game, a laborious performance from Portugal, a stroke of luck, which essentially killed off Hungary, and from there, those last 2 goals were easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Absolutely. So let's give you the lineup here that began the match for Portugal. It was Rui Patricio, Nelson Smith, who obviously makes the start for the now unavailable João Cancelo. If you've been living under a rock, you know that João Cancelo tested positive 2 days before the match for COVID-19. He is now deemed out of the tournament because he has been replaced on the squad by Diogo Dalot, who was just recently playing for the under-21s in the Euros there. We can get into that in just a moment or two, or within the podcast here. But Nelson Smith, Pep, Ruben Dias, and Rafael Guerreiro in the back. Danilo and William in that double pivot with Bruno Fernandes, Bernard Silva, Diogo Jota, and Cristiano Ronaldo in the attack. The first I guess opportunity for the Seleção came in about the 5-minute mark as Bernard Silva hit Diogo Jota with the through ball. And for all the times, Eric, that we have told, or not we have told, but we have wished that the team would not force the issue to Ronaldo. This was a perfect opportunity to force the issue to Ronaldo, as he was absolutely wide open. Just a touch through the 18 would have had him one-on-one with the Hungary goalkeeper, but that was not to happen. Ronaldo a little miffed that he didn't get the ball there, but a good start, I would say, for the Seleção. You also had Bruno Fernandes finds Jota again later in the half. You had Pep finding Ronaldo on a long ball that was just a little bit offsides. And then for one of the first controversial parts of the match was when Bernard Silva was tackled by Willy Orban in the box. Some felt that it should have been a PK. Others felt that it was clean because he did go and get the ball first, but there was some contact during that tackle. What was your thought on that, I guess, non-call of Bernard Silva in the box?
Non-call? Are you talking about the one that led to the second goal?
No. In the first half where he was tackled in the box.
No penalty at all.
No penalty there.
No penalty. No, never.
Yeah, never.
It was great. It was actually a fantastic tackle.
It was a pretty good tackle. I will say that.
I mean, I think he hits it with his heel as he comes across and it sort of jackknifes the ball. I mean, it was an excellent tackle. Never, ever a penalty.
Okay. All right. Eric says, okay, remember, last episode, he hates Ronaldo, doesn't think, listen, we're going to get to the bottom of this eventually, guys, I promise. Right before the half, though, Bruno Fernandes, he sends across into the 6 that, I mean, Diogo Jota nicks with maybe just a little bit of misdirection, that the ball falls to Ronaldo, and maybe that little misdirection is what impacts the absolute sitter that was missed by CR7. I think he still has to find a way, Eric, to put that away, but it was slightly deflected and not a lot of time to adjust to the deflection.
You have the slightest deflection, you have the speed, the whip of that cross from Bruno Fernandes, and then you have a really awkward bounce before Cristiano Ronaldo touches the ball. It's one of those where 9 out of 10 times he puts it in the back of the net, but you can understand why somebody would miss that if you use all 3 of those things, or take all 3 of those things that I just mentioned into consideration.
So that was obviously the best opportunity for Portugal as they closed out the half. 0-0 was the score. Right away, though, in the second half, off a corner kick, Pep forces a save off a header. I think the corner was taken by Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes hits one from the middle of the pitch, which I was kind of screaming for a little bit more of. Portugal has this tendency to try to just force feed the ball into the net instead of sometimes taking advantage of guys like Ronaldo, guys like Bruno Fernandes who can hit the ball with pace from distance.
Although, to be fair, that was the only time, Danny, that Bruno Fernandes actually had a little bit of time to make a decision like that. And what a shot it was. Gulashi was tremendous in this game. I mean, he made some key saves. The one to deny Pep was outstanding. Seemed like it was slow motion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, he again, and we'll get to a retrospective of this match in a little bit, but it wasn't for lack of opportunity nor lack of trying. Portugal was going up against a team like Hungary that was sitting back for the majority of this match, and we'll talk about the one time that they did break through. Luckily, it was in an offside, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Maybe a bit of lack of creativity to try to maybe not do the same thing over and over again, but the change came in, I guess, the attack and in the philosophy here around the 70th minute when Rafa Silva came in for Bernard Silva. But again, 10 minutes later, they're still trying to figure out a way, and they get hit with that counterattack that led to the goal that was luckily ruled offside. But Eric, you mentioned it, and I was going to ask you about it. I don't know where or if or I shouldn't. I don't know when is the proper term here. I don't know when that flag went up, and I don't know if that had any impact on Rui Patricio's effort there. And I don't want to question the effort, but getting beat near side on that angle is not exactly what we're expecting from our number one goalkeeper.
That's true. Although I may have been a little bit harsh on Rui Patricio when I said that, it was poor goalkeeping, because at the same time, the cliche, and I mentioned the word cliche before, the whole near post thing is overdone. There's a far post that the goalkeeper has to protect as well. And Pep is well beaten by Schöne when he cuts inside at speed. And very often you see players aim for the back post, trying to curl it in, just get it inside of that far post. So that's also in Rui Patricio's mind. He has to adjust himself. He has to set his feet. And ultimately, it's a very good shot towards the near post. Should he have saved that? I think so. He gets a hand to it. But it certainly wasn't a howler. And it was one of those...
No, it wasn't.
Right. And it was one of those situations where you feared for Portugal, because Hungary had opportunities in transition that could have been threatening. And a lot has been said about Danilo and William starting together in this game, because, the argument is that you needed some more fluidity, some more speed, some more zip in the passing in the attacking third. Neither offered that. But defensively, Danilo and William Carvalho put out a lot of fires when Hungary did break in transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will obviously talk about lineups, and obviously that's something that's going to be a big talking point, I think, between now and the match against Germany, and we'll see what happens from that match. And I'm sure lineups will be talked about again up towards the France match as well. But so we get the reprieve, we get the we're off the hook for the goal. A few minutes later, Renato Sanches and André Silva, they come into the match. Renato Sanches was just a breath of fresh air and a much-needed change of pace in that midfield. And again, it's not anything against William nor Danilo, because as you mentioned, Eric, they put in the work that has been asked of them time and time again. I don't have all the Renato Sanches statistics here, but I was just going through official matches, not friendlies. I believe Portugal has something like 28, 29, maybe 30 matches, shutouts. And this philosophy, it's not pretty. It's not aesthetically pleasing to the eye. But Eric, wouldn't you want to have a match where you're giving up 0 goals more time than not?
Well, it won the 2016 Euro.
Absolutely.
France won a World Cup in 2018 playing the same sort of football. And they may very well win this Euro as well, playing defensive and counter-attacking football. I tweeted this out, that the difference between Deschamps and Fernando Santos, I actually said that they were cut from the same cloth tactically, but the big difference is that Didier Deschamps has Kylian Mbappe, and what a difference that guy makes, right?
Boy, Matt Hummels I can't believe he was able to make that tackle.
Oh, what a tackle.
Oh, my God.
Tackle.
Unbelievable. But we see Renato Sanches and André Silva come in. William and Jota go out. About a minute later, Portugal finally, they break through with just the prettiest goal you've ever seen. So Rafa has the ball on the right-hand side of the field. He gets it into the box. Rafael Guerreiro, who for whatever reason was in the middle of the pitch, and I know that he was moved up a little bit with the substitutions. He's able to maybe free up a little bit. Hits one. I want to say he hit it with the outside of his foot, but it takes a deflection. I think off of Willy Orban. Yeah, and
commits the penalty.
And it goes right into the net on the left-hand side. Not the prettiest, but it was the breakthrough that, quite honestly, it wasn't the again, I go with the aesthetics. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing goal I've ever seen, Eric, but I will say Portugal was on the front foot for most of the match. They were trying to take it to Hungary, and yeah, it wasn't the greatest thing I've ever seen, but I thought it was a deserved goal given the way that Portugal was in command of the match for the majority of the match up to that point.
Yeah, I don't think you can disagree with that assessment, but as commanding in terms of possession as Portugal were, they did create a few chances, but I thought that Hungary defended excellently. And in that second half, I felt that Portugal were less threatening than they were in the first.
100%.
The biggest difference was that Bruno Fernandes was playing somewhat more free positionally in the second half. He came to life. He had that shot, but also the play that leads to that first goal. Not enough has been made about Bruno Fernandes dropping into that central right channel, threading that ball to Rafa Silva, bypassing two defensive lines. And then, of course, there is a little bit of luck. But that was a space that was rarely occupied by Nelson Semedo or Bernardo Silva, vertically, I mean. In fact, actually, the best chance that Nelson Semedo created for Portugal was a cross from that same channel, just a little bit deeper, closer to the byline, where he crosses it in. I don't know if he's looking for Bruno Fernandes or Jota. The ball is slightly behind Jota, and Jota forces a save out of Gulashi when perhaps he could have laid it off for Bruno Fernandes. So that inner right channel was a way to really get at Hungary. It wasn't used enough, and that's why Rafa was introduced, and that is why João Cancelo was really missed in this match, in my opinion.
100%. 100%. We do get the breakthrough in the 84th with the goal from Guerreiro. 2 minutes later, the aforementioned Rafa, who the impact he made was obviously a huge one. They win 3-0. He's involved in all three of the matches or of the goals, gets 2 assists. But that was all started with Renato Santos just bossing that midfield up in the lead up to that through ball to Rafa Silva. He does get called, or he does get taken down, I should say, in the box. Again, not the most black and white penalty. I have gone back and forth on my thoughts on if a penalty should have been called there. As I sit here today, right now in front of this microphone, Eric, I'm not trying to appease the fan base here, but where's the tactical? Well, I guess where is the tactical defense there to tell me the viewer and the Portugal fan that isn't a penalty? I mean, he clearly gets stopped in the box. There is no play on the ball. He gets pulled down again, not physically, but this is our counterpoint here. This is the first time we're going to get into it.
Yeah.
If I didn't call it a penalty, could you see it be called a penalty? I guess if you're let's look at it on both sides. If it wasn't called, could you see the argument for making it a penalty?
A very sort of slim argument. Look, Willy Orban is much stronger than Rafa Silva, who is a very good player.
Then he shouldn't be pushing him around in the box, Eric.
he makes starting runs. There's a little bit of contact, but overall, he's just stronger than Rafa. Rafa is off balance, and he goes down. For me, it's not a penalty, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Look,
I'll ask you this. You this. I would question, and we shouldn't question when something is called, because if it's a foul, it's a foul, whether it's in the first or in the 90th. But it's a 1-0. It's a 1-0 difference, or it's a 1-0 game. Portugal is winning. Is that a call that you should make when it will make all the difference in the world in the outcome if you're not 100% sure that it is a penalty? And does it make a difference in calling that a penalty in the 20th, other than or calling it in the 85th or 86th?
No, I think we're overthinking this. Look, Shunet Shakir is one of the veteran referees in FIFA's international stage. I mean, this is a guy who's reffed hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of games. He's Turkey's #1 referee. He thinks it was a penalty, and in that situation, once you go to VAR, I don't think you have clear and obvious evidence to overturn it. It's as simple as that, because of that contact that you're talking about. But it is a soft penalty. And when you hear Efene Koku, who, by the way, is a color commentator that I have a lot of respect for. I really like the way he calls games. And then you have Mark Clattenburg, who's an excellent referee, also telling you that he doesn't believe it's a penalty. Look, I'm not saying that it's not a penalty because they said so. As soon as I saw it, I shook my head and said that's not a penalty. You know,
No,
and I know
get
that
it.
there are probably Portuguese fans, only Portuguese fans, I think, listening to this podcast, screaming at me. But I try to be as objective as possible. And objectively, for me, if that happens anywhere else on the pitch, it's not called a foul.
I'm gonna get you off the hook here because I tweeted out my thoughts after the game, and I thought that it was not a penalty. I've seen that now about 20 different times. I can see why it was called a penalty because I'm not sure what Rafa could have done more in trying to get out of the defender's way here. But I mean, we're just gonna agree to disagree. It's not a big deal. We already got the amazing first goal, so whatever, man. We were in a good spot, but that call obviously leads to Ronaldo scoring international goal number 105. It also now has him alone atop the European Championships history with 10 goals. He breaks his tie with Michel Platini. And then in injury time, again, Rafa, all the difference. It was I believe I saw on Twitter, it was a 33 pass approach right up towards the 1-2 magic that was that Rafa and CR7 combo. I think you succinctly put it where it was. Hungary had already given up, so it's not that big of a deal. But again, in terms of the aesthetics, which we are not so much used to watching this Portuguese side, that was a thing of beauty, and I thought it was exquisite passing, especially given the area in which the passing was happening between Rafa and CR7.
Yeah, and look, the one thing that connects all the goals, they were all born on the right side.
Yes,
and that
sir.
was actually a tactical switch that was made. Bruno Fernandes, as I mentioned before, was coming deeper into the right side, and Portugal began to create overloads on that side that were very difficult to deal with. He finds Rafa for the first goal in that channel. The second goal, the penalty, it also happens because Rafa is running into that channel once again. And the last one, you see all those passes, the 33 passes, I think 2 or 3 of them go to the left side of the field and not completely. You also mentioned Rafael Guerreiro showing up in the center of the box, and that's because there was a conscious effort to overload that right-hand side. They thought they would have success there, and it worked. It also gave Fernando Santos something to think about, and that is that Bruno Fernandes is more effective when he comes deeper into the midfield. So what that does in terms of figuring out whether William and Danilo start together again, I don't think it will make much of a difference in his thinking, but he may give Bruno Fernandes a little bit more liberty to find the ball in deeper positions.
Yeah, and that gets us to the final, 3-0 in favor of the good guys. Portugal sit atop Group F with 3 points, plus 3 goal differential. France, later on in the day, they beat Germany 1-0. So Portugal and France, to not many people surprised, they are sitting atop after match day one for that group. Wednesday, of course, Saturday is the next matchup for Portugal as they take on Germany. Eric, you saw the Germany and France match. I was unable to because I had to do the 9 to 5 after the Portugal match. So what were your thoughts on Germany and France, and what does Saturday look like to you in terms of what Germany can do against the Seleção?
Well, it was a really interesting game from a tactical point of view. I wasn't surprised that France deferred possession mostly to the Germans. I don't think their 3 center back system worked particularly well, and marginalizing Joshua Kimmich to the right wing back role really hurt them, I think, in the first half. France did what they did so well in 2018 in Russia, which was they hunkered down. They were quite defensive, and they used Kylian Mbappe's speed to break in transition. And very often catching Germany off guard. And really, France should have won that game 3-0, just marginal offside decisions going against them. I looked at the XG of that game, and it showed that Germany actually had better XG, right? So the statistic that measures the probability of a goal being scored. But what wasn't counted in the XG are those two opportunities that France score, which are chalked off due to those marginal offsides. So I think that essentially Germany played into French hands. They had a lot of possession. In order to try and carve through that defensive block, they had to commit a lot of bodies. They had to try to create overloads. And when they lost the ball, they were ripe for the picking. And this is what France is going to do ever so well. Insofar as Portugal's game with Germany is concerned, I think Portugal should be confident that they have the individuals to beat Germany. But this is going to be a very desperate German national team. And one thing that gives me some optimism is that they were really having a lot of trouble with their system finding ways to break down a deep block. And I think that Fernando Santos is going to use a deep block against the Germans and hope to play efficiently in transition. They're missing, Germany is somebody like Miroslav Klose, a big number 9 who is a reference point in attack. Every time the ball went wide to Gosens on the left or Kimmich on the right, and they looked for targets in the box, nobody was there who was particularly proficient in the aerial game, or somebody who's really going to rough it up against Varane and Kimpembe. Cristiano Ronaldo can do that, by the way. So I think that if you look at this game from a tactical point of view, I think there's a lot to feel good about Portugal. But at the same time, this is Germany. They have been pegged back, and they are going to be ravenous against us.
Yeah, and not to mention a home match for the Germans this coming Saturday in Munich. Let's talk about the players here from the Hungary match. Who stood out to you in terms of starters? Whether it was a positive or a negative, just maybe pinpoint one positive and pinpoint maybe someone who didn't come to play, if you will.
Well, let me start with one positive and one guy who I knew was going to start this game, but I made the case on Twitter that perhaps he shouldn't, and that was Semedo, Nelson Semedo. I thought he was excellent in keeping possession defensively. He won almost every single one of his duels. I actually looked it up on Opta. I think he won every single one of his aerial duels. He was taking a beating in the first 15 minutes. I mean,
yes, he was. I didn't think he was going to survive. To be honest,
I mean, it was incredible. So from that standpoint, I thought he was excellent. He recovered a lot of possession as well, and one of the most impactful players in the first 25, 30 minutes. Created that opportunity for Jota, which he shoots at Golashi. But I did think that he didn't offer enough verticality on the right. I made that point on Twitter. In fact, a couple occasions where you saw Fernando Santos just basically begging Semedo to attack that channel. And that's one of the reasons we saw Rafa come in to create those overloads on the right-hand side. And even though he combined well with Bernardo Silva, neither of them really stretched that back line as much as you could stretch such a deep back line. On the negative, it's going to sound weird because he had good goal-scoring moments, but I thought Diogo Jota was poor in this game. He gave away a lot of possession. He was selfish in the first play. If Cristiano Ronaldo scores that goal, if he dishes the ball to Cristiano Ronaldo and he scores, I think we're talking about a smackdown. Portugal, I think, would have run all over Hungary because Hungary would have been forced out of their defensive shell. But I thought there were a lot of bad decisions from Diogo Jota, that one specifically. But it was mostly his inability to keep the ball, possess it, and the fact that and this is something that I mentioned in the first pod, he and Cristiano Ronaldo tend to take up the same spots, and they got in each other's hair a little bit. And you saw how frustrated Cristiano Ronaldo was. And I tweeted out that he may murder Jota before the end of the first 35. So I was a little disappointed in him. And this is a guy that you and I said could be a real X factor. I thought he would be the X factor, and he very well may still be that X factor for Portugal, somebody who could bang in the goals for the national team.
Yeah, for me, I thought in terms of, and again, we go back to, this team, the identity of this team, and the identity of this team is to win ugly and not to give up goals. And I think you mentioned it perfectly in terms of France's approach to Germany. I don't see it changing much coming up for the Seleção against Germany. And I thought that, say what you will about Williams, say what you will about Danilo, those guys, time in and time out, put in the work that is asked of them to allow an attack to take place for the Seleção. Now, again, you lose a little bit of creativity in the middle when you're using multiple defensive midfielders, but I can't think of a better tandem for what Fernand Santos wants to do in the middle of that field than those two gentlemen right there. And I think that they played a very good game, not particularly great, but they did what they needed to do. Not a lot of time was spent by Hungary in the Portugal half of the field to where they needed to, stop anything of any substance. But I think, and I think that they'll get the call against Germany here. I think those two were a positive. I'm with you in terms of the. I think Bernard Silva and Jota left a little bit to be desired in their play. But I would not have them sit just based off of that one game. I think that a match like Germany, given that the Germans have to kind of be on the front foot a little bit, may open up the field to play a little earlier than maybe what Hungary was giving us, just simply because a loss, Germany could be very well out of the Euros right away. Given we'll see what happens with the third place, but I do think that Jota and Bernard Silva could play a little bit better, and I think that they should get an opportunity to rectify whatever wrong, quote unquote, that they displayed in that first match against Hungary.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was looking at some of the numbers. Pep and Danilo recovered more balls than anybody else in the Portuguese national team. William was third. Going back to the point that I made about Jota, nobody lost possession more often than Jota did in that game. I completely agree with your assessment of Bernardo Silva. I was a little surprised he was pulled, only insofar as the fact that this is a guy who can beat people one-on-one, short spaces, and when you have a deep defensive block like that, a low block like that, you need sometimes somebody who's going to slice and dice by himself. So I was a little surprised that he was pulled, but only for that reason, because his performance could have been a lot better. Again, look, I'll harken back to the first podcast. I asked you if I could fantasize about my lineup, and in my lineup I had one pivot, which was William, and then I had Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva in the midfield three, because sure. I knew that this was going to be about possession, this was going to be about short spaces, quick passing, and there is no doubt that William and Danilo slowed down the attacking processes in possession, 100%. But one cannot discard the importance of the defensive work, which I've already noted. And another point that I had made in the Twitter sphere, as I was getting bashed about my, about my points, is that
leave Eric alone, guys. Come on,
please leave me alone. I'm fragile. Is that continuity is very important in a tournament like this. Okay, a short tournament, it takes time sometimes for teams to get going. Not Italy, by all measures, but there's no doubt in my mind that Danilo and William start against Germany for their physical presences alone. Add to that the fact that Portugal is going to be on the back foot for much of that game, and the big difference between the two teams is mentality. Listen, we won the Euro, and now we are a candidate. And Fernando Santos actually said in the run-up to the tournament that we were always considered a dark horse, but after winning, now we're considered a contender. Right? You need to win silverware in order to be counted among the big boys. But I don't know if mentality-wise, we still have that sort of driven, truculent, winner's mentality, and that is something that just courses through German veins, and that is one thing that I'm personally afraid of in this game. With Germany with the backs against the wall, I think they're just going to gun for Portugal, and it's going to take a defensively solid performance. It's going to take sharp, incisive counterattacking football. And it's going to take Danilo and William to be at their very best.
We're talking with Eric Krakauer here of beIN Sports. He is, of course, our Portugal match analyst during Euro 2020 here on the Seleção podcast. You're listening to episode number 46 of the show. I'm your host, Danny Pinto. We are looking back at the 3-0 victory for the Seleção against Hungary to open up our group play action at the Euros. We have Germany coming up on Saturday. That is June the 19th. And obviously on June the 23rd, we take on France. But first things first is the Germans, or are the Germans? Eric, you're an educator. It's are the Germans, correct?
Yes, are the Germans.
Okay. So I will say this, and it's a question that I wanted to ask you on our last pod, but in the flow of the conversation, I forgot to ask. But when we talk about lineups, and you as someone who has played the game at a collegiate level, and you obviously work for beIN, so you see match after match, and you analyze and do the play-by-play. But Eric Krakauer, the coach, let's get into your head there. As a coach, do you, or what is your philosophy, I should say? Do you put your best 11 in terms of your philosophy out as your starting 11, or do you put your best 11 given what you think the opponent is going to do, or do you just make the opponent act off of what they think you're going to do? And now I'm confused, but you know what I'm saying, right?
I know exactly what you're saying. Look, it comes down to individual preference. The interesting thing for me, insofar as Portugal is concerned, is that the pragmatist approach to counter whatever Germany is going to throw at Portugal may be their best 11, right? Or what Fernando Santos perceives to be the best 11. And that may very well be the exact same 11 that we saw against Hungary. Maybe, there's some rumors about this. Maybe Jota comes out. Maybe Bernardo Silva comes out. But I'd be surprised, because both of those guys offer things that Portugal needs against Germany. In terms of Diogo Jota, it's that vertical, aggressive attacking play, which I've already made the point on the previous podcast. Nobody else has offered for Portugal in a very, very long time. Maybe Luis Figo, but not in the same way. And Bernardo Silva, that know-how, the fact that he's played at the highest level for a while now. He's been a key player for Pep Guardiola and Manchester City. He has played against so many of these guys. He's teammates with some of these fellas. So I don't know if that answers your question, but if I were to sort of burrow into the mind of Fernando Santos, a la John Malkovich, then I think that he's going to be pragmatic. He watched that game against France. There's no doubt that he watched it 100 times. He broke down every pixel, and the conclusion that he has drawn from that is that look at how sturdy defensively France was. Look at how they managed to create all sorts of problems in transition, especially with Kimmich and Gosens being caught up top, further up the field, and Hummels with his lack of pace. We're going to pretty much model our game around what France did.
And to piggyback off of that, given that there is an opportunity to make the knockouts by placing third, and now obviously it's not a guarantee. It's the best 4 of the 6. But given that there are only 8 teams that don't make the knockouts, again, a philosophy question: do you play a bit more conservative in group play, and then maybe unleash a more aggressive approach once the knockouts become a reality?
Listen, Danny, don't. I asked you if I could fantasize last week. I'm going to tell you that you're not allowed to. There is not an iota of me that believes that we're going to see an attack-minded, front-footed Portuguese national team in this tournament. It is going to be conservative throughout. The only reason they weren't conservative against Hungary were because they were superior individually, and because Hungary hunkered down, they bunkered down, and that's why we saw that Portugal. That is not the Portugal we're going to see against Germany. That is not the Portugal that we're going to see against France, unless France managed to invite them into that game and then burn them with pace, which is a distinct possibility. But if I'm going by their match in the Nations League, because they were in the same group, the second one in particular, France was not going to be afraid to take the game to Portugal. So I don't think, whether it's the group stage or whether it's the knockout rounds, I think we're going to see a very similar Portugal to the one we saw in 2016, just with more talented players who can do more with less and can turn those perhaps infrequent attacking forays and translate them into goals a little bit more easily than the team that won in 2016.
You know, we talk about we've talked about philosophy, I should say, for the last couple of minutes here, and I want to get to some of our questions. I tweeted out before the episode earlier in the day. If you guys are listeners and the supporters of the podcast had any questions for Eric and myself, and more so Eric. Eric is the guy that knows a little bit better than I do. I'm just running the ship here and have a nice little pee on my hat there. That's the length of that. But we did ask for some Twitter questions. You guys were kind enough to hook us up with about a handful of them, so we really appreciate that. And Eric, I'm going to ask you here to just hang for a second as I try to figure this out here on the screen. We're moving the screens here, folks. If you're just listening to the podcast, I apologize for these last 10 seconds here, but here we go, and boom, bam. There it is. Look how you know what? Hey, is there like a technical director at beIN Sports, like a vacancy that I can fill in?
I don't know about vacancy, but it's definitely a position.
So if the professionalism that was these last 30 seconds, I'll put it on my reel. But a good friend of the pod and a former guest on this show, Eric Vieta. You can follow him on Twitter at HammerEV, EV for Eric Vieta, of course. Again, philosophy here. Are we winning because of Fernando Santos or in spite of Fernando Santos?
At beIN, I often get accused of sitting on the fence when I do the locker room debate show with Thomas Rongen and Kalen Kyle. I'm going to say it's a little bit of both. We are winning because of Fernando Santos, because he has instilled a little bit more of a winning mentality, because he has managed to formulate a blueprint, a defense-first blueprint that has gotten us a title and that continues to, in many ways, pay dividends. So I don't think we can ever take credit away from him. In terms of in spite of or despite Fernando Santos, yes, I guess when you have such a talented group of players and you are sort of shackled by his tactics, you can point the finger at him and say that, we could play better and maybe would win more games against better opponents, and Cristiano Ronaldo would score against these bigger opponents because he hasn't scored against France or Germany or the likes of England in his career. So if he were a little bit more adventurous, more audacious, maybe he would be able to do that. And maybe we would win a tournament like this more convincingly. But it doesn't really matter whether it's convincing or not. What matters is the medals around the necks and the trophy and the cabinet.
Absolutely. We thank Eric Vieta for his question there. These next two surround themselves around again, a philosophy question in terms of players who are on the bench and impacting the game like Renato Sanches and Rafa Silva did. But I'll give you both questions here, and then we can delve into it. But Anthony Steves, I follow him on Twitter at the Azorian One, a huge supporter of the pod. Known Anthony for a long time. For the rest of the tournament, do we keep Renato Sanches as a sub who brings a boost of energy in the second half, or have him start a game or two And to follow that one up, Eric, we have Daniel Fernandes at, you can follow Daniel at Daniel F_7. For the Germany-France matches, does the double pivot of William Danilo make sense with Hanath coming on later versus tired legs, or does it make sense for Hanath to start? I think the latter, or the first part of that question we kind of answered already, but in terms of Hanath Sanch, what do you think his best role is for this team right now, Eric?
Well, I think that Fernando is got it right. I actually had this conversation with Tiago Estevão after the game. Tiago Estevão, who is a scout, and you can follow him on Twitter. He's a guy who knows the game very well. And after the game, he and I were having a little discussion on WhatsApp, and I called a lot of Renato Sanchez's games for Lille this season, and he has come a long way. I mean, he has matured tactically under the management of Christophe Galtier, but he is still a player for me who I think lacks a little bit of tactical maturity, and that scares me in a game against a tactically mature and astute German national team. Despite the fact that this is a team that is going through its struggles under Joachim Löw, it is still a team that tactically is smart, right? And Renato Sanches, I think, sometimes has lapses of concentration that can cost his team. Having said that, he made a difference off the bench. He is explosive. He is the only guy on that team who can burst through defensive lines in the way that he does, rasgar as linhas, to use the Portuguese term. We saw that. We saw that when he turns in the play that leads to the penalty, turns, loses the ball, wins it back, and attacks. So I think that this is a guy who is going to be very, very key coming off the bench when there are tired legs, as Fernando said. But having said that, I would not be surprised if he started against Germany. I really wouldn't. But I don't think he will. He will definitely see him off the bench. I was surprised that it took so long for Fernando Santos to pull him off the bench. And if the biggest thing that you can point at Fernando Santos and say you need to do better is the fact that he took too long to make his substitutions.
Yeah, first substitution was Rafa in the 70th minute for Bernard Silva. I think he spoke about it a little bit after the match. I think he said the team was playing well up to that point, and he didn't want to. And I'm paraphrasing here. Didn't want to mess with the chemistry, for lack of a better term. But as the game got going, he felt that the change needed to be made, and obviously he pulled the trigger, and it was a good one with Rafa and then Renato Santos right after that.
Yeah, I think you have to look at all three substitutions that he made, and I think he got them spot on because of what was needed in the game. Now, I think he got a little bit lucky with Rafa because I think his first 5 or 6 touches, he just gave the ball away. In fact, he may have been involved in the play that leads to the disallowed goal. So he was a little bit sloppy, but he did run into the right positions. And once that first goal was scored and, Hungary were already weak in their knees, Renato Sanches is exactly the kind of guy that you want just barreling towards those defenders.
And and there's something to be said, Eric, just because you come off the bench and you put a performance like Renato Sanches did with his pace, his physicality. A lot of people are saying Rafa should come in should be a starter or should be unleashed a little bit more simply because he has a pace that is lacking right now in the starting lineup. That's all well and good, but sometimes guys it's okay for them to come off the bench and be that change of pace, to be that piece of the puzzle that is needed to change a game. And we saw that in this Hungary game where, it was a tough go of it for the first few minutes and the first few touches for Rafa Silva, but then you saw what happens when his speed is unleashed. You saw what happens when Renato Sanches is able to kind of boss the midfield around. It's a term I've used a couple times here, but I mean I don't know how else to say it. I mean, like, his physicality and his speed and his offensive prowess to get the ball going forward was a good change of pace. And sometimes you need that, given it's a defensive-looking team for 9 times out of 10 for this Seleção, and it drives people crazy. And I get it, but I'd rather this approach and come with victory than tinker, and then we're sitting with a must-result game against France. Not saying that it would cost us a game against Germany, but you know what I'm saying, Eric. It's like, if it ain't broke, it's not pretty. But if it ain't broke, why are we gonna? Why try to fix it?
Yeah. It's, the only counter that I have to that is you look at the performance against Spain in the second to last friendly, and the way that the Spaniards were all over Portugal. So it wasn't broke then, but it didn't look too good against Spain, right? So
Fair enough.
Look, it depends. I agree with you. I was just trying to play the devil's advocate there.
Sure.
I agree with you. And, there's no shame in coming off the bench. There's a reason there's a bench, and there's a reason a coach makes strategic decisions about the players that come in. Some of the responses that I saw on Twitter when Rafa was subbed in, a lot of people were up in arms. Rafa, of all people, to come into this game? Why Rafa? But it made complete sense based on what we were lacking. Now, that's what I thought in the beginning. Once he started losing all those balls, I was like, oh man, maybe I was wrong. But then again, sometimes it's about being in the right place, attacking those particular zones that you need to attack, and wait for something to go your way. And boy, did something go Portugal's way in that first goal.
100%. Let's go to our next question here. It's from Hui, and you can follow Hui at HuiMVR. He used every bit of the 280 characters on this one, Eric. So I'll read it, and then we'll kind of attack it piece by piece here. He actually brings up a question that I failed to ask you about last week too. So I'm glad that he brings it up about the 5 subs. Given that they get 5 subs, are you surprised we didn't see more sooner? Do you think the moment got to Jota? Is Rafa the ultimate weapon against tired defenders? How do you see the rest of the bench factoring as we move forward? Let's go to that first question here. I mentioned it after our interview. I obviously feel that the 5 subs clearly give nations like Portugal, France, England, Italy, teams that are stacked. They give a clear advantage over teams like a Hungary, like a Russia, like North Macedonia, because they just don't have the depth that these other nations, these favorites, have. So I think that the 5 subs obviously is an advantage for these bigger club or these bigger teams. But given that they do get 5, to get to Hui's question, and I think we answered it a little bit in the last question. The 70th minute, when you have 5 subs at your disposal, seems a little bit late in the game on paper. Obviously, the flow of the match is going to dictate that. But what do you think of the 5 subs? And again, surprised that a move wasn't made earlier.
Well, I already mentioned that I thought he went to the bench a little bit too late. I will push back, and I don't know if I believe this, Danny, but I'm going to push back on that common sense point that you made about, the better teams bringing better players off the bench. I think, yes, of course there's truth to that, right? If you can bring, if you're France and you can bring Giroud off the bench, who's a guy who's a proven goal scorer. No, he didn't score any goals in the 2018 World Cup, but he still won the World Cup. But a guy who, obviously can come in and add something to your team. The fact that you have somebody like João Felix, sorry, my cat's attacking me. You have somebody like João Felix coming off the bench.
What's your cat? Yeah, we got to stop, Eric, because we have stuff. What's your cat's name?
Ramona.
All right.
Ramona,
well,
yeah. Or
hello.
my daughter calls her Mona. But just before I lose my train of
sure,
thought,
go ahead.
You have somebody like João Felix who can come off the bench. But one thing that lesser teams, if you will, can also do is if a manager has done his job in selecting players who fit the type of football that he wants to play. In this case, Rossi for Hungary, guys who are defensively minded, who are good defenders, or guys who fit the attacking profile of Zalai or Shalai, one of the 2 forwards who are physical target men who can mix it up with tough defenders. the advantage is continuity there. And this is a word that I used before when talking about Danilo or William. And the thing that I find interesting about Portugal's bench, and this is actually something that Fernando Santos spoke about when he released the roster, was that if you look at all 26 of Portugal's players, they all have, for the most part, very distinct profiles, right? So when you bring in players, substitutes, for the most part, you're changing something in the dynamic of the game, right?
Sure.
And you saw that with Rafa. You look at the bench. Who else offers the pace of Rafa? Nobody. Nobody else does. Everybody else on that bench is pretty static. He comes in, you know that this is a guy that you want to add verticality, add a little bit of zip to the game. So when it comes to Portugal making substitutions, and I understand the point that Fernando Santos made about chemistry in the post-game press conference, is that given the profile of players that he has, those substitutions would inadvertently change the dynamic of the game. And that can sometimes be risky because you may lose rhythm. You may make a tactical change that could become your Achilles heel when you meant to get something positive out of it. Obviously, that's what you want when you sub a player in. So I understand the reluctance in a manager with a bench that has such disparate talents, the reluctance to pull the trigger on substitutions. I really do, even though I think he should have gone to the bench earlier. So I don't know if I answered the question, but it's not as simple as going, oh, that player is tired, I'm going to sub him out, right? There are different qualities to different players. They bring something different to the team, to the collective. And sometimes you pull one string, and who knows what happens to the ball of yarn, I guess.
And with the cat making an appearance, that is an apropos analogy there.
Yes,
absolutely.
It is. I think that was subconscious.
Yeah, the only thing I heard was Hamana, so it's fine. Eric, honestly, this is why we bring you on, man, because it's insight like this that I really appreciate. Listen, I'm no member of the media. I'm a fan of this team. It's my number one team in the world. I have a background in radio. I have a background in media a little bit, but getting someone like yourself, getting your perspective on this helps with this show tremendously, simply because you bring a lot of validity and you bring a lot of equity in your explanations of these things because of what you do and the road that you took to get to where you're at. And I like hearing when you're saying, like, I'm glad you want to go counterpoint on me sometimes. If we were to agree on everything, Eric, this would be really boring. And listen, I appreciate the synopsis and the just your take on all these things. We talked a little bit. Yeah, man,
I'm pretty sure that some of the listeners just were like, "No, Danny, he's wrong, and you got to tell him that he's wrong."
Well, I'm sure there's listeners saying, "You know what? Hey, Danny, you're right on that. You are boring."
Oh, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
In terms of, let's go to the other part of the question here. We talked a little bit about Jota being a little bit of a disappointment. To use Hui's question here, do you think the moment got to Jota? I don't think the moment got to Jota per se. I think you have some. And Eric, we haven't even talked about this. It was a full house in Hungary. It's the only match that is going to be at full capacity. Apparently, COVID never happened in Hungary. Tell that to João Cancelo. But I mean, it was the first match. It was Jota's first match in this kind of environment. No, because he started or he played a little bit in the Nations League in 2019. But the first match in a while. I would not have any issue with Jota getting another shot as a starter against Germany. Again, do we think the moment got too big for him? I think that might be a little bit much. It's just maybe he just had a bad day. That's all.
No, look, I thought he was wasteful against Israel. They were playing at home in an empty stadium, right? I don't think there were any fans in the stands in that game. And he's a guy who, if you followed his career at Wolves and now at Liverpool, he has hits and misses. He can be a game changer in one match where he'll score one or two, just sort of blazing a trail into the box, getting on the end of a cross or having the ball just bounce off his shin pad and fortuitously landing at his in a good shooting position. But this is a guy who sometimes just is clumsy, looks clumsy. I've talked a lot about the fact that he has these attributes that you don't see in Portuguese forwards. But at the same time, he lacks the sort of elegance of Portuguese technical players, right?
It's a great word, elegance. Absolutely.
Right? He's just not an elegant player. He's the complete opposite. I mean, just contrast him with somebody like João Felix, for example, who looks like he kicks the ball with a feather or he caresses the ball with a feather. And it looks like Jota has a martelo for feet, martelos, right? Hammers. To go back to Eric Vieira and his handle, right? But martelos can be effective, especially against low blocks. It just wasn't his game. Having said that, he could have scored a couple of goals. Kulashi is forced into 2 big saves.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Quickly to finish up Hui's Twitter here. Rafa, the ultimate weapon against tired legs or tired defenders. I think we can both agree on that. It's a great option for that. I think one of the players that was not on the 23-man sheet that could also do that for you is a Gonçalo Guedes with pace.
Right, who wasn't on the bench for this game.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's you get 26 guys here instead of the normal 23, and somebody's got to be left out. But speed when the team is playing the way it is, obviously, is going to be something that Fernando Santos will hopefully bring off the bench if needed. And we have that player in Rafa, we have that player in not Santos in a way, and also Gonçalo Guedes if he's on the bench. And then going forward, I guess we mentioned Gonçalo Guedes. He was not on the bench, but part of that bench. Do you see who do you see the rest of the bench factoring? How do you see the rest of the bench, I should say, factoring as we move forward? I guess players that we did not see against Hungary. We saw João Moutinho make a cameo appearance towards the end there. But anybody that we didn't see against Hungary and that you think can factor in moving forward still?
I mean, look, Sergio Oliveira is a guy who's won a lot of plaudits for his work in midfield. I think a lot of people expected him or Ruben Neves to start in this game against Hungary. Given that they didn't start in that game, I don't think they'll start against Germany. They could potentially come off the bench, especially if Portugal concede early or concede in the first half. I think one of those two guys will come off the bench in the second half. I think Guedes will continue to be one of the odd men out. He just did not have a very good season with Valencia. Again, I called a lot of his games. He looked disinterested at times. And I know he scored some pretty big goals, none bigger than the Nations League winner against Netherlands at the Dragão, right? That was at the Dragão, that game. But he's just a guy that he's just never convinced me. He's never convinced me. He's a guy who's got a rocket launcher of a right peg, but he's just, I don't know. There's just something about Gonçalo Guedes that has never really convinced me. And I guess with Rafa on the bench, Fernando Santos believes he doesn't need him.
Yep. No mention of Rui Silva, guys. Sorry. I'm just kidding. That joke didn't even land in this room. So we'll move forward. Last question here.
I was reading the question already.
Sorry. Last question here from Simba Walker. You can follow him at Simba_Walker_. Nice little tip of the cap in his avatar to the Danish flag, and obviously our thoughts are with Christian Eriksen and just an absolute scary situation in that match for Denmark in Denmark. I'm sure we've seen it more times than we probably needed to, but I don't speak for Eric many times here, but from both of us, we just wish Eric or Christian Eriksen nothing but the absolute best, and glad to see. I think he's already taken to social media had a thumbs up picture from his hospital bed. We hope nothing but the best for him. Obviously moving forward with his life, to hell with his career right now, just that everything is okay with him. But with the question, Eric, what changes can we see to the 11? Can't play the same squad every 3 to 4 days. It's been a truncated last 15 months for everyone involved. I think in terms of most minutes played, I think Bruno Fernandes sits at number 1 in this tournament. I think Ruben Dias sits probably like in the top 6 or 7. We are of the opinion that in terms of philosophy, we don't see much changing in these group matches between or against Germany and France. Could you see, though, any changes to the lineup in keeping that philosophy the same? Could it be at right or left back? Could it be in the attack? Could it be in the middle? What, I guess, if you were to make one tinker or two to the starting 11, what would you do in the next couple of matches that you could see Fernando Santos doing as well?
I don't think there are going to be any changes. I think it's going to be the exact same 11. You know, and I've been thinking about this, and this might be something out of left field, but out of the two candidates to be left out of the 11, you mentioned both of them earlier, Jota and Bernardo Silva. Out of those two, if I had to choose between the two of those, keeping one and benching the other one, I would bench Bernardo Silva. And I mentioned Sergio Oliveira, a guy who can keep possession, who can, switch the point of attack very quickly. He could come in. That creates a tactical switch here, maybe a little bit more of a diamond formation with Jota and Cristiano Ronaldo up top. So you'd have Danilo really at the base, Sergio Oliveira and William either side of him, and then Bruno Fernandes just ahead of those two guys. That could be a possibility in order to make sure that Germany doesn't take control of the midfield. Because if there's one thing that I think you learned from the game against France, is that even though Germany had more of the ball, France was very capable at plugging up that central avenue and forcing a lot of balls wide to their wing backs. And without a proficient goal scorer or a target man, as I mentioned earlier in this pod, Germany don't look the same threat in the box as they have, in previous tournaments, whether you have a Mario Gomez or you have a Klose. I think I would not be surprised if he relinquished a winger to add another central midfielder. I really don't think that is too far-fetched of a notion.
Well, guys, we thank you obviously for your questions. Appreciate you guys sending those in. We'll try to do one of these each time we got Eric on. At a minimum, now we'll have him on to preview the France match and then a little bit of a recap at some point during this tournament. But we appreciate everybody's participation here in the pod with Twitter. Follow us on Twitter, of course, at Seleção Pod. That's SELECAOPOD. It's right on the screen if you're watching us on the YouTube. So, Eric, we think that I'm in agreement with you there. I think that the starting 11 will be the same. If I had to pick maybe someone who could be a surprise starter, it would not surprise me in the least to see Nunes Mendes maybe make his debut. It would be a tough assignment given how Germany will probably come on the front foot. Might be tough for a young man making his tournament debut, but I could see him doing it. I wanted to get your take. I saw it was one of your hot takes during the last few days, but you were of the opinion that you would have started Diogo Dalot instead of Nelson Smith in this first match. I won't say that we should start him here or ask you to say that we should start him here, but just give your reasoning for that, because I think that got a little bit lost on Twitter, because obviously it's just, some people just looked at that tweet as just clickbait. It's like, oh, I can't believe he's going to do that. Well, give the guys that are listening to the show a reason why you thought that it could have been an option for Fernando Santos in the first match against Hungary.
Well, Diogo Dalot had a very good season at Milan this year. He was very consistent in his performances. Smith wasn't. He was poor at Barcelona. At Wolves, I'd be lying if I told you that I watched all their games. I didn't, because as you know, I work mostly with La Liga and Liga, as well as South American football. But I watched a few of his games, and I think he's been a little shaky, lacking some confidence. Sort of the same thing that really affected André Gomes when he was at Camp Nou. Dalot, I already mentioned the fact that he had a very good season at Milan. He was also very good in the under-21 Euro. I know that people have pointed out that he was bad against Spain in the semifinal, and he was also a little bit fragile against Germany in the final. But my counter argument to that is Portugal were weak in both those games. They were atrocious against Spain. Should have gotten spanked. The kid Diogo, I forget the name of the goalkeeper, the Portugal
Costa.
Diogo Costa was phenomenal against Spain, and then you take a deflected goal. Boy, was that an omen for the game against Hungary? That crazy deflection.
Yeah, absolutely.
To give the winner against Spain. And no, he wasn't very good against Germany, but Germany dominated that game after the first 15 minutes. They were just much more physical. And the other point that I made is that his delivery in the final third is so much better than Nelson Semedo. I mean, this is a guy who can really whip in a cross. And the point that I was making is that considering how deep Hungary were, that maybe the solution at some point was going to be a good ball for Cristiano Ronaldo to get his noggin onto. And actually, he found himself in pretty good positions to get crosses, but the crosses never found him. They were either too short or too long. So that was my reasoning for Dalot. I don't think he's a superior player to Semedo. I prefer him to Semedo, but I don't think he's a superior player to him. So nothing against Semedo. But again, I think that in many ways, Semedo proved all his doubters wrong in the game against Hungary. And all those qualities that were on display against the mighty Magyars are the qualities that he's going to need to use against Germany.
Last thing before we let you go here, we didn't ask for a prediction against Hungary, but let's have some fun with Germany. What do you think will be the outcome of this second match for Portugal against Germany in Munich?
So do you want my Portuguese objectivity, or do you want pure objectivity?
I want pure objectivity, and if it's not Portuguese objectivity, then I may just delete it out of the podcast.
I think Germany wins this 2-1.
Wow. Okay.
I think Germany wins this game, and it sets up that crazy last game against France. The optimist in me says it's going to be 1-1, but
that's where I'm sitting too.
Right, but I'm really worried about an early German goal. I really am, and so we'll see. I don't know if I said that they would leave it late against Hungary in the first pod. I know I didn't make a prediction.
We didn't do predictions in the last one.
But I was not too optimistic about that game. And in my mind, I always thought it was going to be a difficult one. I thought we'd edge out Hungary 1-2-0 at the very end. I was very happy with the goal difference of 3 goals. But I think this is going to be, again, not to say the same thing, just a desperate Germany back to the wall. And I think they just managed to edge out the Seleção.
All right, buddy. Well, listen, these takes and many other takes you can find on Eric's Twitter account. These are all your takes, by the way, Eric. No one is proxying these.
Coursing me. Ramona, as she's at my feet.
You gotta watch out for her thumbs, though. You gotta be careful. Oh, is she gonna make an appearance?
She's gonna make an appearance. Hola.
Oh,
Hola.
Look at that. She's pretty. Look at the green eyes. I'm sure that wasn't by accident, huh, bud?
She's a shelter rescue.
Oh, good for you, man. Awesome. More people like you should be doing stuff like that, man. Again, Eric, I cannot thank you enough for your time. We go along because the conversation is oh so good, in my opinion. Have fun watching the rest of these matches. Obviously, we'll look forward to getting your getting your thoughts on Saturday's match against Germany. And yeah, man, all the best to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. And, I didn't say this in the first pod. I'll say it now. Viva Sporting.
You know what? You know what? Chris, now we're going to pull the curtain. Chris was right to be pissed off at you. Yeah. Hey, Oliveira, I'm with you now. You're the best, man. Thank you very much.
He's keeping you in that little closet over there that with all your jerseys and your.
Hey, he is right there. If you're looking at the video, he's right there, there. All right, my man. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much.